Hey, this is Judah Mantel for SceneForge Studio, and in this video I'm going to go over version 0.6.35. It has a great new feature that I'm sure you'll notice already that I'm really excited about, so let's jump right in. So I have this scene here with a lake and some terrain, some objects, and most importantly we have some trees. We have a ton of trees spread all throughout the map, and this is essentially the big new improvement in this release that I want to talk about. So in this release you can use the terrain editor to now add and remove trees, which adds so much more realism to the way your scene actually looks. So I'm going to zoom all the way out here, and we can start by sculpting a little bit more. So you can see I'm going to add some more hills around over here, so you can see the way that works. And now we can use this new option on the far right of these edit modes to add trees. Now in this release specifically, we only have two types of trees. We have conifers, which are nice tall forest-like trees, and then we have cypress trees, which are a little bit smaller, as you can see over here. But in the future, in the near future, you're going to have full support for other types of foliage, such as grass, flowers, as well as detailed rocks to add to the terrain, just to fill out the environment in a much more realistic way. So this works just like any other terrain brush. You can choose a tree you like, click the add or remove, and just simply paint. Now in this mode, the brush strength is the density of the trees when you spawn them in. So if I lower this, they're much more sparse. And you can see the cypress trees also. And of course you can remove them. I'm going to turn my stuff up all the way just to remove these in the background, because we don't really need them. And you can see the way it works like that. Now these trees are really great. They're very well integrated with the terrain and well integrated with the environment. But there's a couple things you'll notice. First is that as I move the camera around, you see they kind of flicker a bit. This is because they use a level of detail system to adjust the actual 3D mesh depending on how far away you are from the camera. This is a performance optimization, and that's what makes it run really well on most computers. But in practice, with a regular shoot mode camera, you're not going to see that much of a difference. It's really just for scene editing and to make sure that the trees in the distance are still visible, but not rendering at full detail, just to save on performance. Now these trees are physical objects, which means they interact with the fog and the weather and the sky. So you can see that as I adjust the angle of the sun, you can see the subsurface scattering between the transparent leaves, which is really great. And because we have some fog here, you can see the sun shafts or god rays, depending on what you want to call them, shining through the actual trees themselves, which looks just so cool. So you can see that there. Now these trees, while they are physical objects, they do not interact with the autofocus mode, so keep in mind that you can't click to focus on them. You can click to focus on the terrain, but not necessarily trees on the terrain. So if I wanted to pull focus between our character here and this leaf here, I would want to find a manual focus distance that looks good and matches the distance of our branch. So that's that. Now next I wanted to quickly talk about the global illumination and indirect mode that was added in the previous release, because there was some confusion about the way that works that I just wanted to clear up. So first and foremost, the global illumination or indirect light intensity slider in the visual settings is a global screen space effect that affects everything on screen at any given time. So you can see here the leaves are very dark, but if we increase this, we actually get the more accurate light scattering between them. Obviously this is an intense value that you're not actually going to want to use, but just so you can see the way that works. So even turning it up a little bit adds that extra light bouncing between them, which is great. That is for the directional light, the sunlight. Now, as well as all other lights in the scene. But now previously, we have a global illumination and indirect mode on a per light basis. This worked really well, and it's still present, but it was on a per light basis and didn't affect the directional light in the scene. So where the system really shines, the new system, is for emissive materials like neon signs and lights baked into objects, or the sunlight in the scene. You can use these two global illumination modes in conjunction with each other. So I can see as I increase the intensity of this spotlight here, the light does not bounce behind and around it like it would in the real world. For example, there should be some light underneath the spot beam because the light bounces. And as I increase this, you can see it scattering around the object 2. You can't see the flicker here. That's because it's calculating it in real time, and it is a screen space effect, so just keep that in mind when you're working with the system. So you can see on an intense level, you can see the light bouncing over here. But if you don't want to use the directional light, or for example, if you're in a completely dark environment, it is much faster on your computer, and literally faster, to just choose a manual indirect mode for the light itself. So you can see we have multiplied, which accurately multiplies it around the area. Or we have ray traced, which quite literally traces rays from the light source and is much more accurate than the multiply GI, and probably more accurate than the global screen space GI. So just keep in mind those things and mess around with them as you see fit. It is worth noting that because the ray trace GI gets calculated on the fly, just like any ray trace mode, it is a little bit slower, so you're not going to want to use that with lights that move frequently. You can see it takes a second to calculate there. And that's basically that. But on the subject of lights, something else that was added in this release is the ability to hide light objects from virtual cameras. So if you're using SceneForge for set design, or for kind of planning out where objects are going to be on set for like tech viz and things like that, obviously these light meshes are really useful for adjusting the rotation and everything like that. But in a fully virtual set environment, you might not want the actual light objects to be seen. So I'm going to make this a little bit brighter in here and take my virtual camera. I'm going to move it over here so we have our character. Awesome. So in our scene, if we just want light on the character and we don't want to show the actual light object because it would be hidden behind the camera anyway, we could either position the camera like so, but that does limit the ability to get certain shots, especially because the whole draw of virtual production is essentially infinitely customizability. I don't think that was English, but I'm sure you understand what I mean. So what we can do now is select the camera, or the light, and uncheck Mesh Visible to Virtual Camera. So you can see that even though we still have the object in the scene view, and even though it still is casting light, we don't see the object, or at least we don't see the stand. That's a little bit of a glitch, but that will be fixed by the time you're seeing this, on the object. Same goes for cameras. If I want to bring in a tripod camera over here, and I'm shooting with this virtual camera and I don't want to show the tripod, I can do the same thing by disabling that, making sure I select my camera that I'm being used, and you can see now we don't have that tripod anymore. So it just adds more customizability to the scene in the ways that you need. And so with that, that is everything in version 0.6.35. I hope we get good use out of the tree system. It's really exciting, and there's so much more to come. I will see you in the next video.